Hello children, welcome back again to Rini ma'am's class. Today we are going to start with a new lesson, the cherry tree. I know everybody of you love to listen to stories. You ask your parents, your grandparents to narrate stories to you during the bedtime, isn't it? So today we are going to go through one of the stories, The Cherry Tree, written by Ruskin Bond. Let us know about the author. Ruskin Bond, born in 19th May 1934, is an Indian author of British descent. He lives with his adopted family in Landor in Missouri. The Indian Council for Child Education has recognized his role in the growth of children's literature in India. He got the Sahitya Academy Award in 1992 for our published work in English. He was even awarded the Padma Shri in 1999 and Padma Bhushan in 2014. One day when Rakesh was 6, he walked home from the Missouri bazaar eating cherries. They were a little sour, little sweet, small bright red cherries which had come all the way from the Kashmir Valley. So this is a story about a boy who was just 6 years old and he walked from Missouri Bazaar eating cherries. He loved cherries. Even I think you all also like cherries. So bazaar means market and valley, a low area of land between hills or mountains. Here in the Himalayan foothills where Rakesh lived, there were not many fruit trees. The soil was stony and the dry, cold wind stunted the growth of most plants. Stunted prevented full growth. So Rakesh used to live in the Himalayan foothills and there were not many fruit trees. There were very less fruit trees because the soil was not good for the fruit trees. It was stony and the dry wind or the breeze prevented the growth of most plants there. But on the more sheltered slopes, there were forests of oak and deodar. In the hilly region, you might be seeing all these type of huge trees, tall, huge trees. And they grow in the, but sheltered means protected from bad weather. So they grow in those slopes. Rakesh lived with his grandfather on the outskirts of Missouri, just where the forest began. Outskirts, the outer part of a town or city. So Rakesh used to live there with his grandfather. He had a little cottage outside the town. Grandfather was a retired forest ranger. Rakesh was on his way home from school when he bought the cherries. And both grandfather and grandson used to live in a little cottage outside the town. Now what is cottage? A small house, especially which are found there in the country. Retired, having left one's job. And bunch, a number of things typically of the same kind growing or fastened together. So Rakesh, when he was returning home from the school, he purchased some cherries. And do you know how much he paid? He paid 50 paise for the bunch. It took him about half an hour to walk home, and by the time he reached the cottage, there were only 3 cherries left. So he had purchased a bunch, and while coming he ate most of the cherries, and only 3 were left. And when he entered, the grandfather was sitting there in the garden, and he offered cherry to him. Grandfather took one cherry and Rakesh promptly ate the other two. He kept the last seed in his mouth for some time, rolling it round and round on his tongue until all the tang had gone. Then he placed the seed on the palm of his hand and studied it. Now grandfather was given one cherry and Rakesh ate the other two. And Rakesh was enjoying the sweet and sour taste of it and on his tongue until all the tang had gone. What is tang? Taste or smell that is sharp but pleasant. Then he took the seed on his hand, on his palm of his hand and studied it. And he asked, Grandfather, are cherry seeds lucky? Then grandfather said, Yes, of course. Then I'll keep it. He said that I'm going to keep it. Then grandfather said, Nothing is lucky if you put it away. If you want luck, you must put it to some use. What can I do with the seed? Plant it. Prompt answer from grandfather was to plant the seed. So Rakesh found a small spade and began to dig up a flower bed. He took the spade and started digging the flower bed. Hey, not there, said grandfather. I have sown some mustard in that bed. Plant it in that shady corner where it won't be disturbed. So grandfather suggested don't disturb the mustard seed bed and you plant that cherry seed in the shady corner where nobody will be disturbing it. Rakesh went to a corner of the garden where the earth was soft and yielding. He did not have to dig. He pressed the seed into the soil with his thumb and it went right in. Then he had his lunch and ran off to play cricket with his friends and forgot all about the cherry seed. Now Rakesh went to the corner of the garden and what did he do? He just pressed that seed with the thumb and it easily went inside because the earth was soft there. And after that he had taken his lunch and went to play his favorite game with his friends, and that is what? Cricket, yes. And he forgot all about the cherry seed. When it was winter in the hills, a cold wind blew down from the snows and went woo woo in the deodar trees, and the garden was dry and bare. In the evenings, grandfather and Rakesh sat over a charcoal fire and grandfather told Rakesh stories. Now, winter time, hill station, you might be understanding how chilly the weather would be. Yes, it is terribly cold and the wind is blowing so hard that all the trees and all are moving here and there making a sound, whoo, whoo. And during that time, in the evenings, grandfather and Rakesh used to sit over a charcoal fire and grandfather used to narrate stories to Rakesh. Stories about people who turned into animals and ghosts who lived in trees and beans that jumped and stones that wept. All these different types of stories, interesting, haunting, and horror, all these types of stories were narrated by grandfather to Rakesh. And in return, Rakesh had to read the newspaper because grandfather was getting old and his eyesight was rather weak. Rakesh found the newspaper very dull, especially after the stories. After listening to so beautiful, interesting stories, he felt that newspaper is very dull, very boring. But he has to read all the news from the newspaper. They knew it was spring when the wild duck flew north again to Siberia. Early in the morning, when he got up to chop wood and light a fire, Rakesh saw the V shaped formation streaming northwards and heard the call of the birds clearly through the thin air. Then the winter gone, now the spring started, and the birds and all are moving down to Siberia. So that time Rakesh saw those V-shaped formation. Have you ever seen how the flies, how the birds they fly, they form a V shape and they move all together. Just when you get a time, see to the sky, you would be seeing all those beautiful birds and birds moving from one end to the other. One morning in the garden, he bent to pick up what he thought was a small twig and found to his surprise that it was well rooted. So one day when he was cleaning the garden, he saw a small twig and he wanted to pick it up and throw it, but it was well rooted and he saw it very minutely and found what? Do you know what? Yes. He stared at it for a moment, then he ran to fetch grandfather, calling, Dada, come and look, the cherry tree has come up. What? Cherry tree? Grandfather asked because he had forgotten that over a 1 year back when it was planted, the tree now it has come up. The small sapling has grown and it has come up. The seed we planted last year, look, it's come up. Rakesh went down on his haunches while grandfather bent almost double and peered down at the tiny tree. It was about 4 inches high. What is haunches? A buttock and thigh considered together, down towards the knees. Peered, look with difficulty or concentration at someone or something. Now both of them were staring at the small 4 inches high tree. It has come up a small tiny tree. And Rakesh was so happy because he himself has planted it. Now homework for you children. Saving the environment is essential for human survival. All of us must join hands to protect what is left of our planet for a better future. You have to write 3 kinds of environmental issues we face today and the solutions according to you in your notebook. This work you have to do it by yourself. Thank you children. Stay blessed. Stay safe.